The massive space station called Eternal Dominion floated like a metal moon above the blue-green world of Kepler 442b. Its dark hull stretched for hundreds of kilometers, covered in weapon ports and sensor arrays that watched over the conquered planet below. For 3,000 years, the Zelaxian Empire had ruled the galaxy with stations like this one, crushing any species that dared to resist their iron grip. Admiral Zexthera stood in the command center, his tall purple form draped in the black uniform of the Imperial fleet. His forearms moved across holographic displays while his large eyes studied the peaceful world beneath them. 50 million Zelaxian colonists lived on that planet now, having replaced the original inhabitants who had been wiped out decades ago. It was a perfect example of Zelaxian efficiency. The bridge around him hummed with quiet activity. Hundreds of officers worked at their stations, monitoring sensor feeds, weapon systems, and communication channels. The Third Armada floated nearby, 200 of the Empire's finest warships arranged in perfect formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a city, and together they could burn entire worlds. Zexthera felt proud as he looked at his fleet. No force in the galaxy could stand against Zelaxian might. They had proven this truth over and over again, conquering species after species until their empire stretched across half the galaxy. Some worlds surrendered when they saw Zelaxian ships arrive. Others fought and died. The result was always the same. A soft chime broke his thoughts. Lieutenant Kexvar, his sensor officer, turned from her station with confusion written across her scaled face. "Admiral, we have an unusual contact on the outer system sensors." Zexthera moved to her station, his boots clicking on the metal deck. "Define unusual, Lieutenant." "Sir, we detect a single ship approaching from the outer rim. Its energy signature is strange. The computer cannot identify the vessel type or the species that built it." She paused, checking her readings again. "Admiral, the ship is traveling faster than our sensors say should be possible." The Admiral leaned over the display, studying the data with growing interest. The approaching vessel was small, barely larger than a Zelaxian destroyer. But the energy readings made no sense. The ship's power output was enormous, far beyond what such a small hull should contain. Even more puzzling, it was moving at speeds that should tear apart any normal spacecraft. "How long until it reaches our perimeter?" he asked. "At current velocity, approximately 6 hours, sir. But Admiral, there's something else. We've been monitoring communications from the outer colonies, and there have been reports of a new species in that region. They call themselves humans." Zexthera's eyes narrowed. He had heard whispers of these humans in recent months. Another primitive species from some backwater world, probably. The galaxy was full of young civilizations that thought they could challenge Zelaxian rule. They always learned better. "Have there been any conflicts with these humans?" he asked. "Nothing major, sir. A few trading disputes, some diplomatic contacts. Our intelligence suggests they are a recently spacefaring species with limited territory. Most reports indicate they are curious but harmless." The Admiral straightened up, a cold smile crossing his face. "Harmless species do not send single ships into Zelaxian space at impossible speeds. Alert the fleet to condition yellow, raise shields and charge weapon systems to 50%. Around the bridge, officers began carrying out his orders. Status lights shifted from green to amber, and the deep hum of charging weapons could be felt through the deck plates. Throughout the system, 200 Zelaxian warships came to combat readiness. "Sir, should we send a warning message to the approaching vessel?" asked Commander Texmore, his second-in-command. "Not yet. Let's see what this human ship wants. If they're scouts for a larger force, we'll capture them and extract information. If they're lost traders, we'll add another species to our tribute rolls." Zexthera walked back to his command chair, settling into its cushioned embrace. Either way, they're about to learn why the galaxy fears the Zelaxian Empire. Hours passed as the human ship continued its approach. The sensor readings grew more confusing with each passing minute. The vessel's hull seemed to be made of materials the Zelaxian computers couldn't identify. Its weapon signatures were unlike anything in their databases. Most disturbing of all, the ship showed no signs of slowing down as it entered the outer system. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kexvar called out, her voice tight with concern. "The human vessel has just passed the outer sensor grid. We're getting much clearer readings now, and sir, the energy output is increasing. Whatever power source that ship uses, it's more advanced than anything we've ever encountered." Zexthera felt a small flutter of unease in his chest, but he pushed it aside. The Zalaxian Empire had not conquered half the galaxy by showing fear of unknown technologies. Every species they had ever fought had some new weapon or trick. It never mattered in the end. Weapon status? He asked. All systems ready, sir. The fleet reports full combat readiness. Good. Open a channel to all ships. It's time to remind the galaxy why we rule it. The main display lit up with the faces of his ship commanders, 200 of the Empire's finest officers. Zexathara looked at each of them, seeing the same confidence he felt in their expressions. Captains, we face a single unknown vessel approaching our position. Intelligence suggests it belongs to a primitive species called humans. Whatever their intentions, they have made a fatal mistake by entering Zalaxian space without permission. We will demonstrate the price of such arrogance. Murmurs of agreement came from the assembled captains. Some even smiled at the prospect of easy prey. The alien ship will be given one chance to surrender. If they refuse, we will disable their vessel and take prisoners for questioning. Any resistance will be met with the full force of the Third Armada. Are there any questions? There were none. The Zalaxian way of war was simple and had never failed them. As the channel closed, Zexathara turned his attention back to the sensor displays. The human ship was now only minutes away from the fleet's outer perimeter. Soon its crew would learn the same lesson that had been taught to dozens of species before them. The Zalaxian Empire was not to be challenged, but deep in his mind a small voice whispered a warning. No species had ever sent a single ship against a full Zalaxian armada. No vessel had ever approached their forces with such apparent confidence. And no technology had ever produced the kind of energy readings his sensors were detecting. The Admiral pushed these doubts aside. Fear was for the conquered, not the conquerors. In a few minutes he would have his answers. And the galaxy would have another example of Zalaxian supremacy. On the display before him, the human ship continued its approach, showing no signs of slowing or changing course. Whatever these humans thought they could accomplish with a single vessel, they were about to discover the terrible price of challenging an empire that had never known defeat. The countdown continued, and Admiral Zexathara prepared to add another victory to the long history of Zalaxian conquest. The human ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, with a flash of blue energy that lit up every sensor for thousands of kilometers. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, her hands clasped behind her back as she studied the massive Zalaxian fleet arrayed before her. Well, they certainly know how to put on a show, said Lieutenant Commander James Park, her executive officer. He was looking at the tactical display that showed 200 alien warships in perfect formation around their command station. Sarah nodded, her face calm despite the overwhelming odds. At 42, she had been fighting wars since she was 18, first against human rebels in the outer colonies, then against pirates and raiders, and finally against alien slavers who had been picking off human settlements. She had never faced odds like this, but she had never backed down from a fight either. Status report, she ordered. All systems green, Captain, came the reply from Chief Engineer Maria Santos. Fusion reactors at full power, weapons charged, shields at maximum. The ship is ready for whatever comes next. Communications. We're receiving broadcasts on multiple frequencies, said Communications Officer David Kim. Standard surrender demands in 47 different languages. They want us to shut down our engines and prepare to be boarded. Sarah almost smiled. These Zalaxians followed the same pattern with every species they encountered. Make demands, expect instant submission, then crush any resistance with overwhelming force. It had worked for them for 3,000 years. Today that record would be broken. Do we have their language in our database? Yes, Captain. The computer analyzed their transmissions and cross-referenced them with intelligence reports from the outer colonies. We can communicate in perfect Zalaxian. Good. Open a channel to their command station. The bridge crew worked quickly, establishing a communication link with the massive space station. Sarah straightened her blue uniform and stepped forward to face the main screen. The face that appeared was clearly alien, but somehow familiar in its arrogance. Admiral Zexathara looked like a tall purple humanoid with 4 arms and large dark eyes. His expression showed the kind of casual contempt that came from a lifetime of easy victories. Unknown vessel, you have entered Zalaxian space without permission. You will immediately shut down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in the destruction of your ship. You have 60 seconds to comply. Sarah looked directly into the Admiral's eyes and spoke in flawless Zelaxian. Admiral Zexthara of the Third Armada. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Systems Navy. You have exactly 10 minutes to evacuate all non-combatants from the planet below and order your fleet to surrender unconditionally. This is your only warning. The silence that followed was complete. Even the background chatter on the Zelaxian communications channel stopped. Sarah could see the shock spreading across the Admiral's face as her words were translated and understood. Then the laughter began. First from Admiral Zexthara himself, then from voices in the background, and finally from what sounded like the entire Zelaxian fleet. The sound was like the growling of some massive predator, full of cruel amusement. You dare threaten the Zelaxian Empire with a single ship? The Admiral said, his forearms gesturing with theatrical amazement. Your species must be even more primitive than we thought. Perhaps we'll keep a few of you alive in our zoos as an example of evolutionary failure. Sarah's expression didn't change. She had expected this reaction. Every bully in the galaxy responded the same way when challenged. They laughed until the moment they realized the challenge was real. 9 minutes, Admiral, she said calmly. The communication channel cut off, and Sarah turned to her crew. They were all looking at her with expressions of complete trust. Every one of them knew they might die in the next few minutes, but none of them showed fear. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing the odds. Captain, said Tactical Officer Lisa Zhang, the Zelaxian fleet is moving into attack formation. 50 ships are advancing toward our position. Let them come. Weapons status? All railgun batteries loaded and targeted. Point defense systems online. Drone bays ready for launch. AI combat systems fully active and synchronized. Sarah nodded. The Retribution was not just a ship. It was a weapons platform designed by the combined genius of humanity's greatest military engineers. Every system had been tested in combat against human enemies, refined through decades of warfare and perfected for this moment. Communications. Send a burst transmission to the fleet. Message sent, Captain. All units acknowledge and are standing by. The advancing Zelaxian ships were getting closer now, their formation perfect and intimidating. Sarah could see why they had never lost a battle. 200 warships working in perfect coordination was a terrifying sight. But humans had learned long ago that perfect formations were also perfect targets. Captain, said Lieutenant Zhang, the lead Zelaxian ships are charging weapons. They're trying to disable us for capture. Of course they are. They want to study our technology before they kill us. Sarah walked to the center of the bridge where she could see all the displays at once. All hands, this is the captain. In 60 seconds, we're going to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten human civilians. Every person on that planet below was enslaved or murdered by these aliens. Today we start paying them back. She paused, looking around at her crew. These 400 humans represented something new in galactic history. They were not conquerors seeking territory or wealth. They were liberators carrying weapons designed not for conquest but for justice. Engineering, give me everything the reactors have. Tactical, prepare to engage. Communications, start recording everything. I want the galaxy to see this. The Zelaxian ships were almost in weapons range now. Their formation was flawless, their approach textbook perfect. Admiral Zexthara had probably used the same tactics 1,000 times against 100 different species. Sarah almost felt sorry for him. Captain, incoming transmission from the Zelaxian command ship, said Officer Kim. Put it through. Admiral Zexthara's face appeared again, but now his expression was different. Still arrogant, but with an edge of genuine curiosity. Human Captain, your ship's energy readings are most unusual. Our scientists are quite interested in studying your technology. Surrender now, and we will ensure your crew dies quickly after we're finished with our experiments. Sarah looked at him with something like pity. Admiral, you have 5 minutes left. I strongly recommend you use them to begin evacuations. The channel cut off and Sarah turned to her crew one final time. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every species these aliens have enslaved, every world they've burned, every civilization they've destroyed. Today, 3,000 years of tyranny begins to end. On the tactical display, the first wave of Zelaxian ships entered weapons range. Their plasma cannons began to charge with energy that would have terrified any normal opponent. Sarah Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Fire. The first thing Admiral Zexthara noticed was the silence. The Retribution's opening attack came without warning sounds. without the bright flashes of energy weapons that had marked galactic warfare for millennia. Instead, streams of metal projectiles shot from the human ship at speeds that made them nearly invisible. The Zelaxian sensors barely had time to register the incoming fire before it struck. The lead Zelaxian cruiser, Pride of Zelax, simply came apart. Its shields, designed to stop energy weapons and missiles, provided no protection against solid projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The metal slugs punched through the hull like it was made of paper, tearing through deck after deck before exploding deep inside the ship. "What just happened?" Zexathara demanded, staring at the tactical display where one of his finest ships had suddenly become a cloud of expanding debris. "Sir, the human vessel appears to be using kinetic weapons," reported his tactical officer, his voice shaking. "Solid projectiles accelerated to extreme velocities. Our shields are not designed to stop physical impacts at those speeds." 3 more Zelaxian ships died in the next 30 seconds, each one torn apart by the same impossible accurate fire. The human ship's weapons seemed to know exactly where to hit each target for maximum damage. Bridge, engine room, weapon systems. Every shot found the most critical areas with surgical precision. Then, the human ship did something that shattered every assumption the Zelaxians had about space combat. Instead of staying at long range like a sensible commander, Captain Chen ordered the Retribution to accelerate directly into the center of the Zelaxian formation. "Sir, the human ship is charging straight at us," his navigation officer reported with disbelief. "They're moving into the middle of our fleet. Impossible. No commander would be so reckless." But even as Zexathara spoke, he watched the human ship dive into the heart of his formation like a predator attacking a school of fish. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations to come, assuming any Zelaxian academy survived the day. As the Retribution plunged into the enemy formation, thousands of small objects suddenly poured from its hull. They looked like tiny ships, each one no larger than a fighter craft, but they moved with impossible coordination. Zexathara realized with growing horror that these were not piloted vessels. They were machines, controlled by artificial intelligence systems more advanced than anything the Zelaxians had ever imagined. The drone swarm spread through the Zelaxian fleet like a plague of metal insects. Each drone was equipped with weapons specifically designed to target weak points in Zelaxian ship design. They sliced through sensor arrays, destroyed weapon mounts, and cut power lines with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of an executioner. "All ships, target the drones," Zexathara ordered, but his commanders were discovering that hitting the human machines was nearly impossible. The drones moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually calculated to avoid incoming fire. When the Zelaxian gunners thought they had a target locked, the drone would suddenly change direction or use another drone as cover. Even worse, the drones were learning. Every time a Zelaxian ship fired, the artificial intelligence controlling the swarm analyzed the weapon's capabilities and developed countermeasures. Within minutes, tactics that had worked for thousands of years became useless against an enemy that adapted faster than biological minds could think. Captain Chen watched the battle unfold from her bridge, her face showing neither satisfaction nor regret. This was not personal for her. It was simply necessary. "Tactical report," she requested. 47 enemy ships disabled or destroyed," Lieutenant Zhang reported. "Our drones are reporting minimal resistance. Enemy weapons are largely ineffective against our adaptive programming. Casualties? None, Captain. Enemy fire has not penetrated our shields." That was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the human attack from the Zelaxian perspective. The Retribution was not just winning. It was winning without taking any significant damage. The human ship's shields seemed to adapt to every weapon fired at them, growing stronger with each attack. Admiral Zexathara watched his carefully organized fleet dissolve into chaos as ship after ship fell to the human assault. The perfect formations that had intimidated 100 species were now working against them, allowing the human drones to move from target to target with maximum efficiency. "Sir, the human captain is requesting communication," his communication officer reported, her voice barely audible over the sounds of battle. "Put her through." Captain Chen's face appeared on the screen again, but now she was speaking from the bridge of a ship that was systematically destroying the Third Armada. Behind her, status displays showed the complete superiority of human technology over Zelaxian engineering. Admiral, you now have 3 minutes remaining. I recommend you begin evacuations immediately. What do you want? Zexathara asked, his pride finally cracking under the weight of military disaster. Justice, Sarah replied simply. For 3,000 years, your empire has murdered entire species and enslaved the survivors. Today, that ends. You cannot defeat the entire Zalaxian Empire with one ship. You're right, she agreed. We can't. Before Zexathara could ask what she meant, his censor officer screamed a warning that chilled his blood. Admiral, we have new contacts dropping out of faster-than-light travel throughout the system. Multiple signatures, sir, hundreds of them. The Admiral spun to look at his displays, and what he saw there destroyed his last hopes of victory. Ships were materializing from hyperspace all around the system. Not dozens, but hundreds of vessels bearing the same design and energy signatures as the Retribution. The human ship had not been alone. It had been bait. As more and more human vessels appeared on his sensors, Zexathara realized the terrible truth. The single ship attacking his fleet had not been a desperate assault by a primitive species. It had been a carefully planned operation designed to draw out and identify all Zalaxian forces in the system before the real attack began. Sir, I count over 3,000 human vessels, his tactical officer reported, his voice breaking with despair. They're taking positions around our entire fleet. We're completely surrounded. A new voice came over the communication channel, deeper and more authoritative than Captain Chen's. Admiral Zexathara, this is Fleet Admiral Marcus Torres, commanding the Human Liberation Fleet. You are ordered to surrender your forces immediately and prepare to face justice for crimes against sentient life. Resistance is futile. Zexathara looked around his bridge at officers who had never known defeat, now staring at displays showing the impossible reality of their situation. 3,000 human ships surrounded them, each one apparently as advanced as the vessel that had just crippled half his fleet. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Zexathara understood what it meant to be truly afraid. Admiral Zexathara stared at the impossible fleet surrounding his position and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. With over 3,000 human ships closing in on his remaining forces, desperation drove him to commit the one act that no civilized species should ever consider. Target the planet, he ordered, his voice shaking with rage and fear. The bridge crew turned to stare at their admiral in shock. Commander Texmore stepped forward, his face pale with disbelief. Sir, there are 50 million Zalaxian colonists on that world, our own people. I know exactly who lives down there, Zexathara snarled, but these humans seem to care about civilian lives. We'll see how brave they are when I threaten to turn their precious planet into radioactive dust. The massive orbital platform began rotating slowly, bringing its main weapon to bear on the blue-green world below. The planet killer cannon had been designed to crack worlds that refused to surrender. A weapon of terror that had forced the submission of dozens of species. Now, for the first time in Zalaxian history, it would be aimed at a world filled with their own citizens. On the human flagship UES Dauntless, Fleet Admiral Marcus Torres watched the Zalaxian station's movements with grim understanding. A tall man with gray hair and scars from a dozen battles. He had seen enough war to recognize the desperation of a cornered enemy. Sir, the Zalaxian command station is targeting the planet, reported his tactical officer. They're powering up what appears to be a massive energy weapon. Torres nodded slowly. Open a channel to Captain Chen. Sarah's face appeared on his screen, still calm despite the chaos of battle around her ship. Admiral, the Retribution is standing by for orders. Sarah, they're going to threaten the planet. Are you prepared for Protocol 7? We've been ready since we arrived, sir. All targeting data has been uploaded to the fleet network. Torres turned to address his entire fleet. Throughout the system, 3,000 human ships received his transmission simultaneously. All units, this is Fleet Admiral Torres. The enemy has chosen to make this a war crimes scenario. Protocol 7 is now in effect. All civilian evacuation operations are suspended. We are now operating under total warfare parameters. In response to his words, every human ship in the system suddenly went silent. Their engines powered down, their weapons stopped firing, and their communication arrays went dark. To the Zalaxians watching, it looked like the entire human fleet had suddenly given up. Admiral Zexathara allowed himself a moment of savage satisfaction. Open a channel to the human fleet. His image was broadcast to every human vessel in the system. and his words were transmitted on all frequencies. Human Admiral, you have seen the power of Zelaxian technology. This station can crack the planet below like an egg, killing every living thing on its surface. You have exactly 60 seconds to withdraw your fleet from this system, or I will demonstrate why the galaxy fears us. The response came not from Admiral Torres, but from a new voice that somehow conveyed more authority than any military rank. This is Director Elena Vasquez, United Earth Systems Intelligence Division. Admiral Zexathara, you have just committed yourself to a war crimes trial that will be broadcast across the galaxy. Thank you for making this so simple. Before the Zelaxian Admiral could respond, something impossible happened. His long-range sensors, the ones that had detected the approaching human fleet, suddenly came alive with new contacts. Not hundreds of ships this time, but thousands upon thousands. Human vessels were dropping out of faster-than-light travel in every system within 50 light-years. At every major Zelaxian stronghold, military base, and colonial administration center, human fleets were materializing from hyperspace with perfect timing and coordination. Sir, we're receiving reports from across the sector, his communication officer said, her voice cracking with terror. Human fleets are attacking Zelaxian positions everywhere. Thalax Prime, Zextan Station, the Outer Rim colonies. They're all under assault simultaneously. Admiral Torres's voice cut through the chaos with absolute authority. People of the galaxy, this is Fleet Admiral Marcus Torres of the United Earth Systems Liberation Force. For 3,000 years, you have lived under the boot of Zelaxian tyranny. Today that tyranny ends. The message was being broadcast on every communication frequency in the galaxy, reaching billions of enslaved beings across hundreds of worlds. To all species currently under Zelaxian occupation, know that help has arrived. The human fleets now engaging Zelaxian forces are composed not just of human ships, but vessels built with the technology and knowledge of every species the Zelaxians have oppressed. Your suffering has not been forgotten. On the command station, Zexathara listened to these words with growing horror as reports poured in from across his empire. Human fleets were not just attacking, they were winning. Every engagement was resulting in complete Zelaxian defeat, as if the humans had studied Zelaxian tactics for years and developed perfect counters for every strategy. How is this possible? He whispered to himself. The answer came from Captain Chen, whose ship had moved closer to the station during the chaos. You want to know our secret, Admiral? Every species you conquered, you either enslaved or exterminated. When we found the survivors, the refugee fleets, the hidden colonies, the resistance fighters who had been hiding in the dark corners of space, we didn't conquer them. We asked them to join us. Her words were being recorded and broadcast across the galaxy as she spoke. Every ship in our fleet carries the combined knowledge of a dozen different species. Vorthan defensive systems, Celtic sensor technology, Miran stealth capabilities, and human weapons designed by minds that had studied your tactics for decades. We didn't just build a fleet, Admiral. We built an alliance. The truth hit Zexathara like a physical blow. The humans had not developed their advanced technology alone. They had become the rallying point for every species the Zelaxians had wronged, a unified force carrying the hopes and knowledge of the oppressed. Sir, incoming message from High Command, his communication officer reported. They're ordering us to activate the planet killer immediately and make an example of this system. Zexathara looked at the weapon controls, then at the planet below filled with Zelaxian civilians, then at the human ships that surrounded him with overwhelming force. For the first time in his military career, he understood that some orders could not be obeyed. Sir? His tactical officer asked, hand hovering over the firing controls. The Admiral closed his eyes, knowing that his next words would end not just the battle, but 3,000 years of Zelaxian supremacy. Stand down all weapons, he said quietly. Signal our surrender to the human fleet. As his orders were carried out, Admiral Zexathara realized that this was not just a military defeat. It was the end of everything his people had built, the collapse of an empire that had seemed eternal. The humans had not just outfought the Zelaxian military, they had offered the galaxy something the Empire never could: hope. The Battle of Kepler 442b lasted 18 hours and ended with complete human victory. But as Admiral Zexathara would learn in the days that followed, this had never been just a battle. It had been the opening move in the complete liberation of the galaxy. 3 months later, The former Zalaxian admiral sat in a detention cell aboard the human ship UES Justice, waiting for his war crimes trial to begin. The cell was comfortable, with a bed, desk, and even a small window that looked out at the stars. It was better treatment than the Xylaxians had ever given their prisoners, a fact that made his shame burn even deeper. The door opened and Captain Sarah Chen entered, carrying a datapad and wearing the blue uniform of the United Earth Systems Navy. She had been promoted to admiral after the victory, but she still preferred to handle prisoner interviews personally. "Admiral Zex Thera," she said, taking a seat across from him. "How are you feeling today?" The question surprised him. In 3 months of captivity, no human had asked about his comfort or well-being. They had provided medical care, decent food, and educational materials, but they had treated him as a prisoner of war rather than a person. "Why do you ask?" He replied, genuinely curious. "Because in a few hours you're going to testify before the Galactic Liberation Council about Zalaxian war crimes. Your testimony will be broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Billions of people will hear you speak about 3,000 years of oppression and murder." Sarah set down her datapad and looked directly into his eyes. "I want to make sure you understand what this means, not just for you, but for your entire species." Zex Thera had spent months thinking about this moment. The humans could have simply executed him and every other Xylaxian officer they had captured. Instead, they had insisted on trials, evidence, and testimony. They were treating their enemies with more justice than the Xylaxian Empire had ever shown to anyone. "What happens to my people after the trials?" he asked. "That depends on your people," Sarah replied. "The Council has offered 3 choices to every Xylaxian world. They can join the new Galactic Federation as equal members, accepting responsibility for past crimes and working to repair the damage. They can choose complete independence, withdrawing from galactic affairs entirely, or they can continue to resist, in which case they'll be treated as hostile forces. And if we choose integration, then you'll be part of something better than anything the galaxy has seen before." Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the space station that had once been called Eternal Dominion, and was now known as Freedom Station. "Do you know what we found when we liberated your archive worlds, Admiral? Complete records of every species you destroyed, every world you burned, every culture you wiped out. 3,000 years of genocide, all carefully documented by Xylaxian bureaucrats." Zex Thera felt sick. He had known about the archives, of course, but hearing a human speak about them so calmly made the enormity of his people's crimes feel real in a way it never had before. "But we also found something else," Sarah continued. "Genetic samples, cultural records, even some survivors hidden in Xylaxian research facilities. The Morax aren't extinct. There are 12,000 of them still alive, forced to work in your science laboratories. The Hylani culture isn't dead. You had scholars studying their art and music for centuries." She turned back to face him, and he saw something in her expression that might have been hope. "We're bringing them back, Admiral. Every species you thought you had destroyed, every culture you tried to erase. The galaxy is going to be more diverse and more beautiful than it ever was before your empire rose to power." The impact of her words hit him like a physical blow. The Xylaxian Empire had built its power on the complete destruction of its enemies, but the humans were doing something no one had ever attempted before. They were undoing genocide itself. "How is that possible?" "Because we asked the right questions," Sarah said. "Instead of asking how to rule the galaxy, we asked how to heal it. Instead of demanding submission, we offered partnership. And instead of destroying our enemies, we gave them the chance to choose redemption." She walked back to her chair and sat down, her expression becoming more serious. "Your species has a choice to make, Admiral. You can be remembered as the empire that brought 3,000 years of darkness to the galaxy, or you can be remembered as the people who helped build something better from the ashes of their own mistakes." Before Zex Thera could respond, the door opened again, and a young human officer entered. "Admiral Chen, it's time. The council is ready to begin the proceedings." Sarah stood up and straightened her uniform. "Admiral Zex Thera, the next few hours will determine not just your fate but the future of galactic civilization. I hope you choose wisely." As she reached the door, Zex Thera called out to her. "Admiral Chen, why are you doing this? Your people could have simply destroyed us all and taken our territory. Why offer us redemption?" Sarah paused and looked back at him with an expression he had never seen from a conqueror. "Because someone once told me that the moment we stop asking if we're becoming what we fought against, that's the moment we become them. Our strength isn't in our weapons or our ships, Admiral. It's in remembering that freedom defended is always more powerful than tyranny imposed. She left him alone with those words. And Admiral Zexathara spent the remaining minutes before his trial, thinking about what kind of future he wanted to help build. 2 hours later, standing before the assembled representatives of 300 species, he began his testimony with words that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. My name is Admiral Zexathara, former commander of the Zalaxian Third Armada. I stand before you today not to defend the crimes of my people, but to ensure that the truth of our actions is preserved, so that they may never be repeated by anyone, anywhere, ever again. As his words were broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy, a new chapter in galactic history began. It would not be a chapter written by conquerors or tyrants, but by species working together to build something that had never existed before. A truly free galaxy where every being could choose their own destiny. And on Freedom Station, where Zalaxian colonists now worked alongside the liberated descendants of the people they had once oppressed, children of a dozen different species played together in gardens that had once been weapon emplacements. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun.